Hello and welcome to Vibrant Body. Today I'm going to show you an amazing systemic functional bioresonance device that can help you get rid of many of your problems and detect them in the first place. We're going to discuss in detail what systemic functional bioresonance is, how you can scan with this very interesting device, and how you can interpret the results, and also how to rebalance with the same device within minutes the existing problems. So, without further ado, let's get started. But before we do that, please, if you enjoy this type of content, support our work by liking, sharing and subscribing, and also do not forget to hit the notification button. Let's learn about a Kindling Easy and what it can do for you then. We unfortunately start to think about our health when it's already too late, when we have already accumulated a whole package of several chronic conditions, also known as morbidities. And many of those imbalances and morbidities stem from the autonomic nervous system and its dysregulation. Those conditions are also known as acidic diseases, and only a systemic autoregulative functional bioresonance combined with terrain therapy can bring you success here. It's a unique and awesome solution, as you will see. And in order to understand how the Kindling Easy works, we need to understand the autonomous nervous system first. The layman should distance himself or herself from the one-dimensional thinking that a chronic condition simply erupts from nowhere. Chronic systemic conditions and their development history is made up of many layers of maldevelopments, and the beginning remains often unnoticed somewhere in the past. And as long as we do not know the stressors and all epigenetic factors that have started this process, we cannot resolve the impact of the event and we cannot help the patient. And even the goal of eventually conquering the illness by immunological means remains vague as long as the symptoms history and causes are not fully understood. And this is where the Kindling Easy can help you. And in this graph you can see how health conditions develop. We have influences such as the epigenetic factors and environmental triggers such as toxins, but also very importantly psycho-emotional shocking events that lead to chronic stress, toxic emotions, and they affect the limbic system. You can see it also in brain edemas. They cause also energy blockages and symptoms such as sleeplessness and tiredness, but also melatonin depletion and tryptophan depletion. And the results can be seen on the emotional level very quickly. Within 3 to 4 days, you will see changes in the autonomous nervous system and a dysregulation thereof after only 3 to 4 months. And if the chronic stress situation persists, we can then see hormonal dysregulation, adrenaline depletion, Krebs cycle dysregulation, and niacin and NAD depletion, vitamin C depletion, cellular depolarization. The cells go into fermentation mode. We start to observe tissue acidity and other symptoms. And if we still ignore all of these signs, then it affects our organs within 2 to 7 years, and we go into what is called a chronic morbidic state and systemic conditions. So this device therefore looks already at the ANS dysregulation, so we can catch those developments early, and we do not have to wait until the symptoms appear on organ level. And of course, we work also on conflict resolution and cell repolarization with this device. Why do we look at the ANS, the autonomous nervous system, with the Kindling Easy? Because the ANS is the part of the nervous system that contains the most motoric neurons. It supplies all glands, the smooth muscles of the inner organs, and the heart. And it is called an autonomous nervous system because it works without the centers of the cerebral cortex, and thus it functions without a conscious mind. And it works with the hormonal system, and it is controlled by the hypothalamus and the brainstem, especially by the medulla oblongata and the brainstem pons. And the ANS is responsible for all vital functions, as you can see also from the graph here on the right. Blood circulation, heartbeat, breathing, body temperature regulation, blood pressure regulation. It controls also gastric juice secretion, so it really affects the whole body. And it consists, the autonomous nervous system consists of two parts that work together antagonistically. One is the sympathetic nerve, also known as the S nerve, and the other one is the parasympathetic nerve, or the vagus. And all sympathetic fibers passed through the sympathetic trunk, which is a ganglionic chain on the left and on the right of the spinal cord. The parasympathetic path crosses the 3rd, 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve of the vagus, and some nerves emerging at the sacrum. And the vagus leads to all organs in the thorax and the abdomen. So all vital inner organs are always regulated by these two motoric nerves, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, which act antagonistically, and one activates and the other one sedates the functional activity. It's the yin and yang of autoregulation. And in this graph you can see how this works. On the left we have the sympathetic nervous system, on the right the parasympathetic, its antagonist. And for example, the sympathetic inhibits in the mouth the salivary function, while the parasympathetic activates the salivary glands. The lungs, for example, the sympathetic extends the air passages, while the parasympathetic brings about a stenosis of air passages. For the heart, the parasympathetic retards the frequency, while the sympathetic accelerates the frequency, and so forth and so on. And you can see these two antagonists affect your whole body, all organs. Okay, now that we understand why the autonomous nervous system is so important, the question becomes, how do we measure its activity? And this is where the Kindling Easy comes in. Because it measures tissue resistance, a so-called R value, which is significant for the parasympathetic activity, and a so-called C value, which is tissue capacity, and this indicates the activity of the sympathetic part of the autonomous nervous system. Healthy individuals show the following normal ranges of R and C values. Resistance value is between 8 and 15 kiloohms. Capacity value is between 0.15 and 0.25 microfaraday. The sympathetic dominance range is 1.5 to 8 kiloohm and 0 to 5 to 0.5 microfaraday. And the parasympathetic dominance range is 15 to 150 kiloohm and 0.03 to 0.15 microfaraday. There are no gender differences, and children are more sympathetic dominated with a value of 6 kiloohm and 0.27 microfaraday, while elderly people are mostly parasympathetically dominated with resistance values higher than normal, so higher than 15 kiloohms. And the measured values can give insights about the therapy to be applied. The normal P and S range does not mean that the patient is healthy. It means only that he was treated correctly and his body is auto-regulating as it's supposed to. The P and S activities is also influenced by the following data: the mineral balance and trace elements, the acidosis and alkalosis, so the pH ratios, the redox system values, so the electrons and the protons, temperature, and pulse. And was chronobiologically, all of this, it was outlined already by Hoff 70 years ago. And we also look here for the ANS activities at nerve conduction system and glands. S irritation is accompanied by the following typical symptoms: glycogenolysis in the liver, thyroid excessive secretion stimulation, and an increase of blood circulation in the muscles with tremor known as choreidiastasis. Parasympathetic paralysis is accompanied by the following typical symptoms, namely decreasing salivation, atonia of the gallbladder, and inhibition of bile secretion. Some diseases with dominance of the sympathetic nervous system, so here in the Kindling readings means a high C and a low R value, are colitis, psoriasis, ovarian cancer, hypernephroma, malignant melanoma, and seminoma. And diseases accompanied with a dominance of the sympathetic nervous system, so here a high R and a low C value, are focal toxicosis, enteritis, cholangitis, colic cystopathia, state after hepatitis, sclerosis, intoxication, lung carcinoma, mammal carcinoma, and all types of carcinomas in their terminal stages. The great thing about a Kindling Easy is that, as the name suggests, is very easy to operate, very easy to interpret. We're gonna look at some examples and see how easy to understand the measurements are, and also extremely fast in its operation and automated. It has also a self-calibration function, and it allows you for dynamic treatment and measurements of ANS activity that, as we have seen, gives you a lot of insights into what is going on before chronic diseases develop. It offers a 100% customizable assessment and rebalancing modality. So every 2 minutes there is a recurrent self-calibration, and measurements they take place, as you can see, in 5 seconds only, and there is a total of 7 loops per session, so it will take about 16 minutes of time for the whole loop sequences, and which is very, very quick. It's very simple also to use it, this hand-to-hand skin conductivity measurement, and therefore it's easy to use privately also, or to delegate the work to your nurse. It's dynamic, it's automated, and it allows you for an error-free treatment parameter selection based on the most recent self-calibration and measurement. And the complex autoregulative bioresonance procedures are based, as we have seen, on the autonomous nervous system response, and that's what the Kindling Easy is looking at. It's very intuitive, as we will see from some examples in its operation. You need no extra computer, everything is integrated. You also get a graphic representation in color of the ANS changes, and a very comprehensible immediate display of the results, and thus you can explain the results to your patient and gain a very high patient acceptance for your measures. It's efficient, it's no time wasting, and very cost effective for doctors as well as patients. There are 2 very simple ways of taking the measurements with the Kindling Easy. The first channel is the endogenous frequency patterns, which are collected through hand-to-hand measurements using 2 brass gold-plated electrodes. And because sweat production is modulated by the autonomic nervous system, the ANS is correlated with the body's regulatory capacity. And why do we take the measurements in the palms? Because they have a very high density of sweat glands, so 400 sweat glands per square centimeter. The sympathetic nervous system increases sweat gland secretion, while the parasympathetic nervous system reduces sweat gland secretion. The second option to take measurements with this device is the so-called exogenous frequency patterns that are collected from body fluids such as blood, urine and saliva. Let's look next at the graphical representation of the measurements that the Kindling Easy gives you and how easy it is to interpret them by looking at some patient examples. So you can see the energetic response from the display. Here the red line signifies a strong energetic overexcitation. The 40, the green line, is the normal energetic range, and the blue line symbolizes an energetic deficit. And it also, of course, shows you the ANS response. The red line symbolizes a dominant sympathetic tone. The green line is the normal tone of the ANS response, and the blue line symbolizes the parasympathetic situation. Let's look at some examples then to better understand how to interpret the results. And you will see it's very easy. Let's take it from the top left to the bottom right. The first example here, the line you can see is pretty much in the 40s range, so in the green range. And this means that a patient is energetically balanced and has a normal tone and a sluggish autoregulation. The second example with the more zigzag line around, again the green line, it can be interpreted as a patient being energetically balanced, normal tone and strong autoregulation. That's why you see the zigzag and not the flat line as in example number 1. The third example shows you an energetic low patient with slight parasympathetic autoregulation and energy increase. The fourth example shows you an energetically balanced patient with very good autoregulation based on a good ANS response. This is the curve that you want to see, or something similar to this. The fifth example shows you an energetically balanced patient with favorable autoregulation, but with a tendency toward a parasympathetic dominance with an energy drop towards the end. The sixth example is an energy low patient with parasympathetic autoregulation with a jump towards a higher energy at the end of the therapy. This is also known as ignition. The patient here on the top left corner, number 7, shows soft autoregulation with a slight tendency to a stress accumulation, also sympathetic driven, and this is specific for diseased conditions. 8 curve is a parasympathetic driven patient with a soft autoregulation, but with a strong jump into energy normalization and ANS balance. The 9th example is an energetically exhausted patient. As you can see, it's in the blue range with parasympathetic moderate autoregulation and a drop in energy level to eliminate stress. This is often, a curve like this is often characteristic for the healing phase. In example number 10, we see the curve of a parasympathetically dominant start with a strong ignition of normotony. Number 11, same situation as in number 10, but a much stronger effect and jump towards the end. And in example number 12, we see typical autoregulation rigidity, and this can be interpreted as a patient being very sick. There is no indication of the healing effect regulation. So with these curves, you can also very nicely track how the patient reacts to the given treatment and the measures that you take. Some concrete examples. Example number 1 is of a male patient, 72 years old. The patient complains about a heartache and the doctors recommended to undergo a heart surgery. He was treated with a heart-specific preparation, in this case G-strophanthin in 3 milligrams concentration. And as we can see from the curves here, the medication shows a reactive behavior after the 90 minutes of the measurement range here, the last measured final value was 20 points lower already. And indeed, this patient lost his local heart and chest pain, and the surgery was even cancelled. Concrete example number 2 is again of a male patient, 68 years old. He is suffering from colon cancer that is metastasizing, and he came in with an initial R value at 84 kiloohms, as we can see from the graph. He was treated with spenglosam colloidorone, which is an antrophosophical liver preparation, 25 drops in this case. And the curve shows a clear decrease with a synchronal C for sympathetic value decrease. After 60 minutes, both the R for the parasympathetic and the C value for the sympathetic increase again, as we can see. And within 90 minutes, the improvement values are there with an output of R, so the parasympathetic at 36 kiloohm, which means that it is in a normal healthy range. And indeed, this patient survived his cancer for years without chemotherapy or surgery. Example number 3 is of a male again, 82 years old, with multiple disorders, cardiac insufficiency after emergency operation of a perforated colonic diverticulum, as well as senilities. If we look at the graph, we see that the R value for the parasympathetic at the beginning of the therapy was at 78 kiloohms. This patient was treated with Vitorgan 80, 68, 70 and 71 for neurotherapy. And if we look at the curve, it shows a clear decrease of the R for the parasympathetic values from 78 to just 42 kiloohms after that therapy. Also the C value for the sympathetic was reacting very little, and that can be interpreted as a very well tolerated therapy. The R value after 90 minutes went down to 38 kiloohms, meaning that the therapy indeed was very successful and this patient's health state and well-being improved. Next up is a female of 83 years of age who has polyrheumatic syndrome, also arthrosis and circulatory disorders, as well as diabetes. This patient was treated with Vitorgan Revit Organ 43. If we look at the curve shows a clear increase of the R value, the parasympathetic value, then a decrease, and finally heightened values within 90 minutes. This means that the therapy was very successful. Also, the patient reported that the pain diminished significantly and the cardiovascular system was also stabilized. Next example is of a female of 66 years of age who is suffering from a mamma carcinoma that is metastasizing. This patient was treated with galvanic therapy and also homeopathic immunotherapeutic Vitorgan preparations. If we look at the curve, we see several stronger reactions of the autonomous nervous system, and thereafter the health condition is stabilized significantly. And the patient indeed experienced significantly improved well-being. And if we look at the changes in the curve, this also shows us that there is a tendency of normalization. And the therapy was very successful, and for years the patient was free of relapses as well as metastasis in this case. Next example is of a female of 45 years of age who is suffering from mamma carcinoma with multi-sided metastasis, and the extreme malignancy was also determined by a histological examination. This patient was treated with Vitorgan combinations, arthrochilin and galvanic therapy, and these were administered separately on different days. If we look at the curve for the sympathetic C values, we see that they do not react at all. The ANS autoregulation is in a stasis, the stress is overwhelming, there is adrenaline depletion, and in this case the prognosis is not too rosy. And indeed, this patient unfortunately died shortly after this. Another example of a 45-year-old male suffering from seminoma in the sympathicon state as well as secondary esophagus carcinoma. This patient was treated with vital gain combinations, arthro-chelan, galvanic therapy, and all of them administered separately on different days. If we look at the curve, it peaks from a single administration of the medication, and indeed this patient significantly prolonged his life. Next, another type of curve that you might see, this one belongs to a 70-year-old male patient suffering from metastasizing hypernephroma. Sympathicon cancer also was shown in the original curve, and this patient was treated with additive non-toxic therapy, in this case 42 vivid artemisinin and galvanic therapy. The curve shows us the following. It peaks at a parasympathetic R value of 64 kiloohms and has an antagonistic behavior in the sympathetic C curve, showing a positive reaction of the immune system to the treatment. And indeed, this patient prolonged his life for 50 more years with a good quality of life. And last but not least, in our examples, we have an 88-year-old male. And here you can see a long-term curve, because this is what the Kindling Easy also allows you to do, to track the performance of your treatments and how the patient reacts to your treatments over a long period of time. Here it's over 3 years. This patient suffers from bronchopneumonia, and COPD. In this case, he was treated with Splengar SAM-G every second day, twice 15 drops, as well as 42 vivid artemisinins and galvanic therapy. And after a while, we see remarkable heightened R values for the parasympathetic, and thereafter step-by-step normalization. And this indicates that there is a good prognosis and the treatment really works for this patient. With all that being said, I hope that I could explain to you how the Kindling Easy works and how you can use it, how you can interpret the results. Of course, when you get a Kindling Easy, we will always be there for you at Vibrant Body and help you with your questions. If you have any questions about the device itself, please do not hesitate to contact us immediately. We love to talk to you and explain and answer all of your eventual questions. Contact information is in the description box below for your convenience. And with all that being said, stay healthy until next time.